MC today. So I have to say, this is the third event I've been to in 4 weeks. And I was at an event last week for California Guided Pathways, and I was standing in the back of the ballroom, and I suddenly realized I was looking at the back of everybody's heads, which I have not done in 2 years. All I've been able to see are fronts of people's faces and frames, and it was so exciting to just look at the backs of everybody's heads. So, like some of you, I'm a little rusty about being up in front of the stage, so I actually have notes, and that way I'll make sure that I cover all the salient points. So I want to start out with some basic housekeeping. We are going to have a packed day, and my hope is that there will be so many good ideas that you will learn that you want to share them far and wide. So be sure that you're putting things in your Twitter feed. We've got 2 hashtags. Oops, they're no longer up there. One is future workforce, and the second is good jobs equity. So please share the knowledge that you're learning here today. The other thing is that you probably want to know how to get to the Wi-Fi. You'll notice that there's yellow cards on your table that will give you the login instructions. If you need to use the restrooms, you just go out to this lobby and head left. And in addition to the restrooms, we have a business center if you need to charge something or take a phone call or something else that comes up during the day. The other thing that I want to do is just to take a moment to thank the staff here at the Marriott, because when we were putting these panels together, we had this embarrassment of riches in that so many people wanted to come present. We basically had to fill in every minute of the day. So the staff are going to be very stealthily going around and giving you food and coffee today, and I want to thank them for their flexibility in working around our program. Yes, let's thank them. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. What we're really digging into is this question of how, in this radically changed economic environment that we're in, are we going to take this opportunity, seize it, to make a difference, to help more people who are underemployed, who took that big risk and left their low-paying, really unrewarding job to do something better, and make sure that they're really on a pathway that's going to get them to sustaining jobs, things that are durable through recessions, things that pay them a family-sustaining wage. And this is going to be meaning that we're looking at all different aspects of this question. So we'll be looking at state and federal policy. We're going to really dig into who these individuals are that we're trying to serve so that we understand it's not some generic population, but there's different groups of people with different needs that we're going to need to tailor our services to. We're going to focus in on some sector strategies. We're going to talk about the new and expanded baccalaureate degrees that community colleges are offering, really looking at how we're expanding past short-term training. And we're going to wrap up the day talking about all the different regional opportunities we have to work together, because we really do have to work as a group if we want to do a better job of serving populations that we haven't really done so in the past. So I've been working on community college reform efforts for about 20 years. I'm looking specifically at issues of economic mobility for about a decade. And what I notice is when we start having conversations where people start talking about workforce boards or adult education or jobs for all, we silo things off in community colleges. We end up basically talking, say, oh, that's a CTE thing. And we don't integrate it into the broader initiatives that we're working on together. And this is something that we really, really have to change, because when we do that, we reinforce the structures in our society that track some people into high-wage jobs and other people into lifeboat jobs. So one of the things that's really interesting when you look at pathways to economic mobility is that the skills that you need to become a manager or a leader or an entrepreneur are normally taught on the gen ed side of the house, not in CTE. So when if you have someone who comes to you who's in the middle of an economic emergency for their family, and they're like, I need a job right now, and you appropriately direct them into a short-term training program, if we're not thinking about how we're going to reach back out to that student and make sure they can come back and keep going toward their dreams, we actually end up perpetuating the status quo. And that's what we really have to dig into today. So luckily, there's a number of initiatives that are rolling right now that I think are going to be really helpful. So the Foundation for Community Colleges is running a program called REACH, Racial Equity and Adult Credentials in Higher Education. And that is being attached to the Guided Pathways Initiative to make sure that when we talk about guided pathways, we're not just talking about people that are just leaving high school and have a goal of going directly into a transfer pathway. There's also the Strengthening Community College grants that are coming out from the Department of Labor right now, very similar scope. There's the K-16 Regional Pathways applications, which hopefully you all were getting in recently. And of course, all of this links to the Vision for Success. So one of the things that was really interesting when we were planning for this event is we were having the hardest time deciding how we were going to refer to the people that we wanted to serve. And we started falling back to all these different terms that we've historically used, like non-traditional student, or adult learner, or dislocated worker. And these are all terms that we use based on our frameworks about how we think about the services that we deliver. But what's really important is that we remember behind every one of those categories is a human being that has hopes and dreams. And so what I hope as we start talking about the big issues like policy and regional partnerships and things like that, that you hold in mind a student, a person that you would like to serve, so that you apply these principles to the reason you get up and do this work every day. And so I want to model this by talking about a student that I had a chance to meet about 4 years ago named Francisco Castillo. So Francisco came to the US as a young child. He was really a star student, really wanted to become an engineer. He was going to be the first in his family to go to college, and he got into the UC of his dreams in an engineering program, and then his hopes were dashed because he learned that he was undocumented, which he did not actually know until that point. And his acceptance was rescinded. So he had to go get a job working under the table because he couldn't legally work. And he figured out a way to raise enough money to go pay out-of-state tuition to go to community college. And that worked for a little while until his father died. And he did the responsible thing. And he just said, I can't try to go to school. All the money has to go to supporting my mom and my 2 siblings. And for 7 years, he did that. He just worked and worked and worked. And his mom was at him every single day. She's like, no. You're an engineer. This is a crappy job. You've got to do something more. And so he finally went and got DACA status, took the risk, was able to work legally, and started going to American River College. And he got into a certificate program where he was basically doing some design work, and he learned things like AutoCAD. And I talked to the faculty who worked with him, and they were always saying he was the star student. He had everything together, even though he had all this stuff going on underneath the surface. He got to do some work-based learning, and he did some work with diesel technology in a state fair competition, and was able to get to a better job. So he did exactly the thing we normally do with our students, where he got up one leg up. So he was working with drones related to keeping cell phone towers intact. And within 5 months, his managers were like, you are a rock star. And so he got elevated to be a manager, but he couldn't figure out how to go back to school. He couldn't figure out how to navigate the systems in the college. And when I talked to him, I said, well, what is your dream? He's like, I still want to be an engineer. Someday I'm going to go back and get a degree. So I've told Francisco's story in a number of different settings, and I've had some really interesting responses when I threw down the challenge that said, why is there not a clear pathway from construction crafts to engineering? Why is that not the first thing we say to people who come and want to go into those programs? Because disproportionately, they are Latin men, right? So the issue that people say back to me is, well, we can't, because I'm sure he hasn't done the right math. Or we can't, because the 4 years are never going to accept the academic merit of our CTE programs. Or even, well, maybe he wanted that, but you haven't met my students. That's not what they're dreaming about. And I challenge you to say, well, maybe if you ask our students, we'll discover that they do have that dream of a bachelor's degree, and we are in the privileged position to be able to figure out how we can help them get there. We are the ones who build the systems. You have the power in your hands to make it possible for students to attain those dreams, and right now, that is the most hopeful thing I can think about. So I want to now introduce Sonya Christian from Kern Community College District. So I had the honor of meeting Sonya a number of years ago when she was moving forward with getting guided pathways implemented in this state. I was busy working with the Community College Chancellor's Office, and she called me up and she said, you need to work on this, because this is the most important way that we're going to get into structural inequities. And of course I listened to her, because we always listen to her. And now she's taking this work to the work at Kern Community College District and around the state and the country, really digging into those structural factors that make a difference for students. So thank you so much.
Welcome to Kern County, everyone. Super thrilled this morning when I woke up to think that we had the nation really coming to Kern with, where's Amy Lloyd? She's probably getting mic'd up right now. But the beautiful woman sitting here momentarily is Amy Lloyd from the Department of Education, Senior Advisor to Secretary Cardona. She's here with us. We've got folks from Sacramento here and across California, all here in Kern. I just feel hugely grateful. I feel today is an auspicious day. And when I go back historically and think about the work we have done in Kern, and I look at the history of the work that has happened in California community colleges, we have our leader here, Chancellor Eloy Ortiz Oakley. And Eloy really took California community colleges sort of with a storm, with so many policy changes and resulting in culture and changes among practitioners. But I want to come back to Kern, okay? And when I look at that journey, I see that Kern played a significant role in being a catalyst for each of those moments that change happened. And I want to go back to 2016. And I remember that we had a gathering here in Kern County. It was called Redesigning California's Community Colleges. Do you remember the book? Redesigning America's Community Colleges. And you had Bailey, Jagger, and Jenkins. And I think Jenkins got his first exposure to California at that moment. It was February 18, 2016. And I think Chancellor Oakley at that time was transitioning from being the fabulous president of Long Beach City College that really gave us the language of college promise. And it went from Long Beach City College to across California community colleges, where he created this idea that it is a moral obligation for all of us to come in and create that social compact to make sure it's our collective responsibility to lift each and every one in our community. So back to 2016 in Kern, because today my story is the story about Kern and the story about community colleges. So we started the work of Guided Pathways, and truly, Guided Pathways is just a framework. It is just a language for all of us to norm to do the one thing, and that is to make sure student success happens with equity. So equity was always at the cornerstone, the foundational piece to the Guided Pathways work that resulted in the vision for success. So, you know, the 4 pillars of Guided Pathways: clarify the path. Is it clear for everyone, or is it just clear for those who are privileged, right? How do you enter the path, and then how do we create a village around folks and get them to that completion point? So we saw the paradigm shift from access, let's open our doors wide, to, well, that's not sufficient. We need to go beyond access. We need to go to completion, success with equity. So we were like laser focused on that particular agenda, and I would say we've done a pretty good job with the reform that has happened. So from 2016, I'm going to now take you to 2017. And in 2017, we were back in Kern. We had California converging here, the Central Valley, the other California, right? And again, we had, you know, one of our constants was Eloy recognized that the Central Valley was equity. So every time we were trying to move the agenda on student completion in the Central Valley, he was there, he was present, you know. I want to do another shout out when I think about the constant presence of this work. Sean Whalen, you're watching us, College Futures. When I went back and looked at every event we did, College Futures came in a big way. There are a gold sponsor today, and it's all because of Sean Whalen. So back to 2017, the title of that particular gathering was Leadership Matters. And it wasn't necessarily positional leadership. It was about, you know, you're a faculty. What are the attributes and the characteristics you needed to harness and you needed to really step into to make this change a sustainable change with students at the center? Faculty, classified, administrators all coming together. And in addition to recognizing leadership meant influence and not positional leadership, we recognized that positional leadership mattered. If you were the president of the academic senate, what were you going to do about it to move the equity agenda, the student success agenda? And I'm kind of totally in this space right now with the passing of Madeleine Albright. And one of the things that Madeleine Albright really did is she used her positional power to really do the right thing and make sure others did the right thing. So from that leadership, that cultural change to what it meant to be a faculty leader for student success with equity. What did it mean to be the president of a community college with equity? I mean, it was almost like our job descriptions were being rewritten in this guided pathways reform that was moving across all of California's community colleges. And I think it was 2017, Chancellor Oakley, that AB 705 the governor signed it. And, Kathy keeps referring to it as the civil rights.
One of the most significant pieces of civil rights legislation of the past decade.
You heard Kathy Booth, didn't you? Yeah. Transformational legislation, and I would say one of the significant factors that improved the completion numbers for our associate's degrees, our transfers, our ADTs, and always looking at it from a disaggregated data so that we were not only trying to close achievement gaps, but in some cases we actually closed achievement gaps in many colleges across the community colleges in California. So then fast forward to 2019, we were here at the Marriott. Chancellor Oakley, you were here. And we had the senior advisor to the governor. At that time, it was Lande Ajosi, and today we have with us Ben Cheetah, so thank you for being here. And the problem we tackled in 2019 was the problem of baccalaureate completion. It was trying to solve the challenge that was put forward with a 2030 goal of an additional 1.1 million baccalaureate completers here in California. So you can see that the Guided Pathways framework expanded to the 9th grade in high school all the way to baccalaureate completion, 9th grade to baccalaureate completion, without any gaps. So it was intersegmental discussion. So here we are today, 2022, and we are expanding the Guided Pathways framework now to jobs. So we are defining what does it look like, pathways to jobs. Not just jobs, but good jobs. With equity, the future workforce. So just a quick sidebar. I mean, the whole good jobs discussion is an exploration in itself. The definition, I know that there are major think tanks in DC. I know the Aspen Institute. They're tackling the definition of good jobs. For me, simply put, what everyone is accepting right now, it needs to be, kind of good money coming in, but also it needs to be predictable and it needs to be stable. So that, yesterday our president of our board, and talking about our board, I want to recognize two very special people who are here. And that is our vice president of our board of trustees for the Kern Community College District, Trustee Nan Gomez-Heitzberg. And Trustee Giovanni Jimenez, thank you so much for being here. So our board president, who couldn't be here yesterday, he was giving an example, in Kern of a family of 5. And if you have both parents working in the fields with a total income of $30,000, I mean, is it our shared responsibility to make sure that that family has predictable, stable wages and a good job? The answer is yes. So we can even take one of the parents, right, and get them through the work that we are doing, and this auspicious day, to create the energy to develop those systems for one of them to get a job that is $60,000. It's going to be transformational, not just for that family, but also for California. So So the good jobs, definition is that predictable and stable wages. There's a lot there, and I'm not going to try to unpack it in my time allotment. And I want to go to high road jobs. Colleague Stuart Knox, Undersecretary, Labor Agency, California Department of Labor, thank you for being here. So the high road jobs is the phrase that the labor agency is using here in California, similarly to what the feds are using with good jobs. So high road was sort of developed in 1990 by a sociologist at the University of Wisconsin. So it's pretty dated in some ways. The idea is simple. Prosperity is a shared responsibility. Do we agree with that? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, California, absolutely, we're in. And then there was another added piece to that, and that is a recognition that the environmental impact matters. And we need to pay special attention to what we do because there are consequences. So impact really matters, the environmental impact. So around the early 2000s, maybe around 2002, California started adopting this high road framework from a sociologist to a very practical application. And California started recognizing that we're going to be leaders in the nation and in the world, that we're going to be stewards of a healthy environment. We're going to pay attention to our climate. We're going to pay attention to decarbonization. And California really started a revolution in this clean technology, clean energy sort of a revolution, being a model for the nation. So the idea of the high road framework being applied to it, I mean, equity is right there, looking at our disadvantaged communities and the impact. So moving back to the guided pathways and the impact, I was talking to our Vice Chancellor of Workforce Development for the California Community Colleges, and Sandra Sanchez told me that Eloy Oakley's marching orders is not to really focus anymore on just completion. He has told us at the Chancellor's office we need to go beyond the walls of the college and look at the impact. What is it that we as educators are doing, and how does that impact that individual after college in getting that good job, right? So we're all shifting our focus in the California community colleges to look at pathways to employment, pathways to good job, the impact of what we do as educators. And there is an image which is not up, I guess I'm up on the screen, but there is an image on the website that we're branding this discussion, this energy that we're hoping to release. It's a triangle that has the worker, educator, and employer. So this is how we're going to go. Worker, educator, employer. WEE, W2E is the framework that we're doing, bringing in worker, employer, and educator into the same space. Kathy said it beautifully in all of the events today, we're going to focus on how do we find that hidden worker. When we did guided pathways in the early college movement, we did not just sit back and say, we're here, college, come find us, right? What did we do in the shared responsibility model? We created structured memorandums of understanding with high schools so that every ninth grader in the high school had a college education plan and enrolled in college classes. We did not leave it to chance. It was designed into every high school. So every high school in the Kern Community College District, we have our 3 presidents here from the Kern Community College District, president of Porterville College, Claudia Habib, president of Bakersfield College, Zab Databoy, and president of Saracoso Community College, President Sean Hancock. So we have every high school student that comes to us has a plan. When we shift into that same model of making it happen, not just having conversations to have conversations, but when we're making it happen, we have an invisible segment called that are adult learners, adult workers who are working in the fields, who are maybe unemployed. The question, the challenge for us today is how do we find them? And one of the answers is what do we do in creating partnerships with those organizations that represent workers? So sit back and think about it. When you think about organizations that are close to high school students, you think high schools, right? Talk to the principals, counselors. When you think of workers, what are the organizations that come to your mind? One of the organizations that comes to my mind are the unions. So the Kern Community College District is working with SEIU. Why are we doing that? Because the workers trust SEIU, and we can have access to start the work of getting college designed into every worker and not leave it by chance. There are also many community-based organizations that are here today, CAPK, United Farm Workers, Cesar Chavez Foundation, so that is where we need to think about very structural relationships where we don't leave it to chance. And definitely with employers in the same space, because they provide that first job and then the good job with that economic mobility. I also want to call out our educational partners. I saw Superintendent Mary Barlow here. Thank you for being here today. And yes, we are applying for the K through 16 grants that are out there. So right now, I want to invite a person I deeply, deeply respect and who's been a true champion of equity and student success, a transformational leader who I'm fortunate to call my friend, Chancellor Eloy Oakley.